Okay, let's do this. So, hey everybody, it's Ethan Evans. I'm the Easy Coach, and welcome to the show. As you can see, we're here tonight to talk about how to interview well. And what we're going to talk about tonight is first, you can see we're streaming from my house. We decided to go informal once in a while. And second, in good news related to that, Awesome Dave, our producer, who's on in chat tonight, got himself a brand new job, which was part of what we were trying to do. Um, is part of the Easy Coach project was aimed at getting Dave a new job. So that's one success to talk about. And actually, in our Wednesday night show, I may be able to share another. So, as we help people build careers, it's fun to share when they're successful. So, with that in mind, I can't yet talk about where Dave's going because his team hasn't been told. And they haven't made the announcement there, but he'll be starting work in just 1 week. And we'll still use Awesome Dave's studio from time to time. But we have to have a second studio as well for when he's on the road for work. So here we are. All right, cool. So let's see. I think, Awesome Dave, I probably missed an item in the checklist. Maybe you can help out, or maybe I need to do it. Do we have the QA widget up? I say that we're putting up the Ask Questions through the Over Video panel. So for anybody who's new here, I'll just explain. When we do a topic like how to interview well and get the job, what we do is I take questions from the audience. And obviously, a lot of the people watching right now are veterans. They already know the overlay. But something we didn't think through that I'm going to have to figure out on the fly is in Awesome Dave's studio, the questions show up on a monitor in front of me. And here in my new studio, I don't have a way to see them. So I'm going to do a quick bit of ad-libbing while I get a browser open and go to my own channel so that I can actually see the question list as we do it. So that's going to take me just a minute. And hopefully we won't kill that. Oh, kill that for a minute because it's over the video. All right, so I told everybody it'd be a live test, and we found our first problem, which is I didn't think about how to get the questions in view on my new system. But that's all right. We'll jump right in and have that solved here in a second. And if that doesn't work, we'll get one of the moderators to relay them to me. But I don't think we need that. So give me one moment. I can see myself. That's good. And hey, we even have low latency. All right, fabulous. So I see the question widget is up as a panel. Let's see, I need to bump it up over the actual display. Awesome Dave, how do I move the panel into being an overlay here? Just go ahead and put it in chat. That way I don't have to call you. Waiting. All right, so anyway, while we're waiting for that, I can go ahead and talk about a couple shows we have upcoming. Let's see, on Wednesday, just in the announcements category, at Wednesday 8 p.m., we'll be doing a second show, this one on resume review. So I've had a number of people give me their resumes. If you want me to consider your resume in the dashboard, go to extensions. Sweet, working on it. If you want me to review your resume, what I need you to do is send it to me at easycoach1@gmail.com. And we're going to do a live resume review Wednesday night where I'll give feedback. I already have a couple of interesting resumes I want to go over. Some people have sent me 2 pages versus 1 page. A couple people are actively working on jobs, as well as people who've recently gotten them. And we'll go through the resumes. All right. So I'm going to switch my attention here and try and quickly get the extension in the right mode. Right now, if you want to ask questions about how to interview well, you can just scroll down on the web and it's below the fold. Okay, here we go. All right. Social Raid, Blacksmith, viewer questions. Go to the dashboard and set as probably component 1. What if we do that? Oh, okay. Then look for viewer questions, change a component, then position it. I'd recommend overleft over your window. Well, I put it up. We'll see where it is. And if we need to change it, we can. All right. Okay, perfect. Questions are up. Questions are coming in. Awesome. Fixed. So let's roll with this. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. Let's get on with it. So the last announcement I have is on Monday the 24th, I think 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll be joining Devin Nash on his channel, at Devin Nash. We'll be discussing the book Decisive, which both he and I have talked about before. His book club's been reading it for the last month, and so we'll be going over that. So look, let's jump in. I want to start by telling you a story. And it's the story of my Amazon interview, which was a pretty solid train wreck. And as a solid train wreck, there's a lot to be learned from it. And so you can learn from what I did wrong. And I want you to do that so you don't have to. And then we'll start taking viewer questions, which I appreciate people putting in and voting on, because the way the show works is I drive off your list of questions. Let's see. We're going to blow this window up a little more so I'll better be able to read them. Fantastic. So the story of my interview. I interviewed at Amazon a long time ago. I started there in April of 2005. And during that time, I flew into town the night before the interview. I think it was a Thursday night. I was coming in. This is probably mistake number 1. I was coming in from a business trip. It really was business in Las Vegas. And I flew up to Seattle and got in pretty late in the evening, and I hadn't had anything to eat on the plane. So I went down in the hotel, and the only thing left open was the bar. So I thought, okay, bar food it is. And I went into the bar, and I started talking to a guy, and I ended up talking to him till about 3 a.m. Now I had to interview the next morning very early. And so this was, the conversation was very engaging. The man was very upset. He was crying a lot. And I thought, I'm really going to try and help him out. But the result was I was up until 3 a.m. So the happy part is I made one of the best friends of my life on that bar stool. The unhappy part is I was up, till 3 a.m. and then I had to get up about 7 to be in at 8 or 9 for the interview. So I went up to my room, and my general thought was, honestly, I have completely screwed this up. Now, this will play into how I ended up getting the job at Amazon, at least in part, and I want to share that. And the way it plays in is I took the pressure off myself. I figured I've already blown this interview. At least I have a job. And if it's not going to work out, that's okay, because I already have a job, so I'll just go do my best. So the first thing I think you can learn from what I did is try not to go into an interview desperate to get the job. Desperation shows, people can smell it. And if you can go in with confidence of, hey, I hope this works for both of us, but I'm okay if it doesn't, I think that's much better. So what I'm recommending essentially is, if you can, try to have an attitude that says, my life will not end if I don't get this job. I'm interested, I'm eager. You don't want to be dismissive, but lesson 1, go in doing your best and don't hang your life on it. So that was probably the biggest mistake I made. But then what happened? Well, my interview day was pretty long. And in one of the interviewers, I walked into a room. I didn't know any of the people. They didn't give me a list of who I'd be talking to. And I met a gentleman who stayed at Amazon many years. I don't know if he's there anymore, but I was interviewing to be a manager, specifically what Amazon calls a senior manager. And he said, "Well, I hear you're here to talk about management. I don't know anything about that. We're going to code." And that's literally how he opened it. That was like his first or second sentence. And so that's pretty hostile, right? Being honest, that's like pretty damn direct. And I would just say that wasn't what I was hoping for. But you got to deal with it. And so luckily I'm used to coding. I just jumped right in and ran with it. And so that's what I did. And I got through that. But the point you can learn from is if someone asks you a hostile question or you have a difficult interviewer, the next thing is, since your life doesn't depend on the interview, try not to let it throw you. I had no idea what he wanted to talk about when I walked in the room. And when he kind of put it in my face as a challenge, I think, of we're going to see if managers can code, or maybe he was just low social skill, I had to deal with it. And I would advise, if you run into an interviewer who's hostile or difficult, but not actually insulting or something unreasonable, like say racist or sexist, just ignore it and answer the questions. Now, if someone is really difficult, like racist or sexist or inappropriate, absolutely just stop them. Just say, "I'm sorry, I don't need to answer that," or "I'm sorry, that's not appropriate." That should be incredibly rare, and so I'm not going to go deep into that. Like, I've rarely to never even heard of it happening. Most people have enough common sense not to say something that inappropriate, even if they're secretly thinking it. And so, but you don't need to tolerate abuse in an interview. What you may need to tolerate is people who think they're going to see how you do under pressure. And so the key is realize if someone feels like they're coming at you, they may feel like they're trying to see how you react under pressure. And so just be calm. Okay. So, that's the hostile interview. Now, later on in the interview day, I had someone who really made a point that I simply didn't agree with. And for any of the software engineers in the audience, basically they were talking about QA, and at that time, Amazon just pushed a lot of things live. They didn't do a lot of testing. They kind of tested live back in 2005. And I was talking about this sort of normal ratio of QA engineers to software engineers that I had learned in other areas. And we got into a bit of a debate about what was appropriate, what was the right investment in QA. And I said, I stated my point, but I realized this other gentleman who was interviewing me, who turned out to be what Amazon calls the bar raiser, like the sort of a super interviewer. I realized that he had a different opinion. And after I had made my point, there was no need to fight with him. So I just let it go. I had made my point. I had stood up for what I believed. And then I just let it go. Because you want to be firm and you want to be assertive, but there is no value to getting into an outright argument with your interviewer. At least I don't think so. You do want to have an opinion and you want to be able to defend it. But after I did that, I thought, okay, this guy doesn't agree with me. Just let it go. The last thing's kind of a funny ending. So I think I had 8 interviews that day. Remember, I went in with like only 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep and a pot of coffee. And at the end of that, I met this guy who started asking me very strange questions, like, what questions do you have? And, where are you from? And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I knew he was like a leader in the team, but I hadn't been given a lot of context. And honestly, I was much too slow to figure out he was now trying to sell me. So they had decided that it was I was someone they wanted to hire. They had run around in the back channel, and they had said, "Hey, um, get this person get this person on the loop so that they can sell Ethan on coming and joining us." Well, I was still trying to answer his questions. I'm like, "Hey, what do you want to know about me? I'm happy to share." And it took me much too long to figure out, oh, I'm supposed to be asking you questions about Amazon. So that was just a mistake on my part. And the point that you can learn from here is read the person a little bit and listen better than I did. I was tired, but I was also so eager to sell myself, I didn't catch on that by trying to sell myself, I was actually being socially inept in that circumstance because he wanted to know what I wanted to know. And I was asking him, what do you want to know? And so that makes a very strange circle. So it helps to know the the pattern of your interviews. So, hey, I see somebody's encouraging me to do a 24-hour stream. I don't think that'll be happening just yet. But maybe if there's enough good questions. So I have a bunch of points I want to go over for general tips on how to interview well, but we'll take a couple questions and then I'll jump into them. So I see the first question here is, what is a good second answer to the question, what is your biggest weakness? After you tell a story of how you overcame a past weakness and they say, yeah, but what is your biggest current weakness? Well, so weakness stories, they kind of have a pattern, and everyone learns to recognize them. And the usual pattern is people tell a fake weakness or can tell a fake weakness that then they turn into a strength. And you certainly don't want to do that. So a fake weakness is like when you ask, or when you say, well, my weakness is I work too much. So I'm actually a workaholic and my weakness is I work too much. And obviously what you're communicating there is, oh, hire me and I'm going to work all the time. Those aren't good weaknesses. It's okay to be transparent. And I see someone thinks that's classic in chat. Yes. You want to give a real weakness. You want to tell something that really is a problem. Now, obviously, hopefully you don't have problems that be like, yes, that's illegal. You don't want to say like, my problem is I embezzle a lot. Hopefully that isn't you, but if it is, don't do that. So answering the question though, I think just be honest, think through it in advance. What are the things you're working on? So, for example, I got feedback today on our YouTube channel. I was looking at one of the comments, and one of the comments said, hey, you do a great job interviewing guests. It's an interesting topic, but you interrupt too much for shout outs. And I don't think that person maybe realized it was copied from Twitch, right? That we'd taken the Twitch video and posted it to YouTube. But it is an interesting point. When I'm interviewing a guest, how do I balance talking to chat? Now, is that a real weakness? That's very thin. Career weakness wise, my biggest problem is I overschedule myself. I overbook myself to where I'm frantic and I end up having to cut off conversations to run to the next thing. That's something I can be really honest about. So I just think be honest about your current weakness. Everyone has one. You can overcome a past weakness. What's a good answer? I think the good answer is anything truthful that you can also describe what you're trying to do about it. So someone here said, what if you say you're lazy? Well, not a great answer. But even then you could say, well, I'm just going to run with it for a minute. If I actually want to say, well, I'm kind of lazy, Okay, I think audio's back. Yes, can chat confirm it's back? Sorry about that. If chat wants to let me know where I left off, I lost you in the middle of the second question. I guess it was on procrastination. I'm lazy by nature. So I try to build innovation that saves me work. Yeah, Racine, that's a good one. Okay, so on lazy, yeah, there's no real recover from just saying you're lazy. So I wouldn't say that. But oh, I said I was going to run with it. All right, fantastic. There's no real way to recover from having said you're lazy. But actually, in chat, Racine has the best answer I've seen so far, which is you'd say, look, I don't like to work when I don't have to. I don't like to do things the hard way, so I try and find better ways to do it. So I think I've beaten this question to death. The bottom line is share something real and that you have a way to overcome it. And I appreciate someone says I have the lights up too high. We'll take a look at that over time. Let's see. Here we go. How about that? There. More natural. All right. I appreciate the feedback, folks. So we'll get to the next question here in a second. I see it up there. A couple things I want to share from the tip sheet, and we'll run through them. Yeah, I just glow with charm. So first, prep. If you're going to go on an interview, you should do some prep work. Know the company, know the people if you can, find out who you're going to interview with, find out the projects of the group, and do some thinking about it. And what I mean by thinking is have some thinking, be able to answer why you want to join this group, what interests you about this job. Generally, I would say most of the prep is anticipating the obvious questions. So for example, if you have a hole in your background, like you took 2014 off or were without a job in 2014, expect somebody to ask that. Expect them to say, well, what did you do in 2014? Or why is there a gap in your resume? Or why did you leave Acme Inc? You've got to be able to answer those questions. So, all right, we'll jump to the question that's been put up here by the mods. That's great. So I have no experience, I'm 24 and I need a job. How do I explain my lack of experience given I've never worked before? Well, I don't know your full circumstances of why you haven't worked up until 24, but you definitely need to have an explanation for that, ideally a true one. So were you in school? Were you taking care of a sick parent? Were you seeing the world because you're a trust fund baby? I don't know, but you need to own it with some amount of conviction. And so hopefully you were a trust fund baby and you spent that time, romping around the world on a cruise ship, in which case make a good story of it. I had the opportunity to travel the world and I took that opportunity. I thought I have the chance while I'm young to get on a cruise ship and enjoy the good life for 4 to 5 years on mom and dad's dime. I'm gonna do it. Whatever your reason is, you've got to own it and you've got to explain why you're ready to work now. So even there, I have a friend, he's still alive, who basically was a trust fund baby. I don't think he watches the channel much, but if he hears about this or watches the YouTube, he'll know what I'm talking about. And his parents supported him. And he dropped out of college and did things that he enjoyed. And first his father passed away, then his mother passed away. And slowly over the course of about 20 years, he burned through all the money his mom and dad left him. And so he found himself, around 40, 45 with no money and hadn't ever worked. And he had to get a job. And so I guess he had 20 years more of a problem than whoever put this question in. And so he had to explain what he had done. And he said, look, I had the chance to enjoy my life while I was young. And I figured I'd wanted to live my life and do the things I wanted while I was young and had energy, then retire and try and do it when I was old. And he had to work his way up, but he was a smart guy. And I think he first got a job as a security guard and then moved into IT. And then he married well. So I think he's back not working. But the point is, to this questioner, You have to know your reasons and be able to explain them. And then you've got to be very willing to take, I would say, whatever job will get you some experience. Part time, small company, not what you want. Get a job and then go get a better job. You may not be able to come off the bench and get the job you dream of right away. So, and hey, again, I hope you spent those years on the love boat or something. So, a couple more tips I want to share, and then we'll go on to the next question. And if people aren't putting in questions, by the way, just a reminder, and the mods will put it up in chat. If you want to enter questions, use the extension. And for the whole audience, there's a lot of you out there. Log into Twitch and vote on the questions in the extension. That way, I answer the things you're most interested in, because I want to make sure that we address what everybody's watching to see. But wow, I can't get by the way, out of my mind, the idea of someone having had the chance to be a trust fund baby for all that time. And whoever you are, I'm not dogging on you. I just would love to know the backstory of why it is you haven't worked until 24. Were you lucky or unlucky? And maybe share that in chat if you want. And if you want to remain anonymous, go ahead. So another point that's worth making. The number one and number two things that determine how an interview goes, and this is a little bit sad, but it's true, is appearance and enthusiasm. So how you look and whether or not you seem like somebody that I want to work with or that the interviewer wants to work with is critical. And that's what people actually judge on. Yes, they ask you questions. Yes, if you give really dumb answers, they will not hire you. But the key is people actually pick whether or not to hire you subconsciously to a large degree. Humans are inherently relational. And that's why they say open an interview with a firm handshake. How you conduct yourself, your body language, your posture, whether or not you lean in, how engaged you are making eye contact, all of these are nonverbal signals that greatly influence the interviewer. And it is possible to get hired dressed poorly, not making eye contact and mumbling, but it's going to be way harder. And so on dress up a little bit. Now, don't go in a three-piece suit to a warehouse job or to a company that most people wear jeans and a t-shirt. But also, if the company normally wears polos or button downs or something, don't go in your ripped t-shirt. And it's not about dress code, it's about showing you care. You're conveying, I'm prepared for this, I'm invested in it, and your experience is important to me. So don't be a pig. So let's see. Looks like seems you've been at Amazon a long time. You must be accustomed to how to interview at Amazon. That's true. How do you test and calibrate yourself to interviewing at other companies that don't interview like Amazon? Fair question. I did do well over 1,000 interviews at other companies before I went to Amazon. And so I do have a lot of experience there, but I can't answer that perfectly because since I've been at Amazon almost 15 years, it's what I know. What I can say is most companies now, particularly professional companies, excuse me, use a style of interviewing called behavioral interviewing. And behavioral interviewing works on the theory that how you have behaved in the past best indicates how you're going to behave in the future. And so behavioral interviewing is based on the idea, as is often said in the stock market, that past performance is the best predictor of future performance. And so to learn if you're being interviewed that way, first, check out the company and learn their interview style. You can do this on Glassdoor. You can do this through networking at other people who've interviewed there. You can probably do it in a place like salary.com, any place that offers commentary about how a place interviews. go do your research and find out. But the classic form of a behavioral interviewing question, which most at least I'm often asked about the FANG companies, which is Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Amazon. They all use a form of behavioral interviewing, and the key form of the question is, tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you had a significant disagreement with a peer. Tell me about a time when something came up and the project was going to be late, but it was out of your control. And on and on and on. What you need to do in that circumstance is to prepare for those interviews. You think up the night before, the week before, what are some of the things in your career that you're most proud of that cover different circumstances that when you're asked one of those questions, you can use to answer a wide variety of circumstances. So for example, I built Amazon Video, became Prime Video. So I can think about some of the challenges we had launching that, or when we first took it to TiVos, or when we first tried to start the studio portion of Prime Video that now makes its own TV and movies. The point is, I have those anecdotes in my mind, and when I get asked a question, I can use them. So how do I calibrate myself to interviewing at other companies? I do talk to a lot of candidates. I coach people on this stream, but I don't have perfect calibration. The thing is, interviewing state of the art is pretty standard at this point across different companies. The other thing is, obviously people come and go from Amazon, and I hear all the time, oh, at Google we interview this way, or at Facebook we interview that way. They are different. Some places do more coding work or more practical, having you demonstrate skills. There's a lot of different approaches. So, I can't calibrate myself perfectly, but research. Go research the company, find out how they interview. Particularly for any big company, there are people who blog every single question they're asked. So like on Amazon, you can find hundreds, if not thousands of lists of every question someone was asked during the course of their day. And I think this is going to be true at any big or even medium-sized company. So it's about do your research. Next question, please. So a couple other things while the next question comes up. Try to get referred in. So if you want to do well in an interview, nothing sets the tone like having someone mention you. And if you can find someone in the inside the company that you're going to visit, see if they can't get you a list of who you're going to be talking to. Because if you can Google those people and know a little bit about them, or if you can ask your recruiter and say, hey, who am I going to be meeting with? Knowing who you're going to be talking to can make you so much more comfortable than meeting someone cold in the room. So I told the story earlier of I met this guy who immediately said, oh, I don't know anything about management. We're going to code. And I was pretty like, holy crap. You know, he's in my face, in my opinion. Maybe that wasn't his intention, but I felt like, wow, this guy's hostile. If you know a little bit about people, I could have placed like, oh, this guy is a software engineer. He's not another manager. He's going to ask me different questions. I got to be honest, I did a poor job of preparation for my Amazon interview. I didn't do a lot of the stuff I'm recommending here, and that's why I'm trying to teach you better, because I got through kind of by luck in part and thinking fast on my feet, which is this next question. But do the prep so you don't get surprised like that. So how do you think on your feet during an interview? I'm sorry, I don't know how to make you smarter. What I can say is, number one, don't do what I did. Get a full night of sleep so that you're awake. Number two, take your time. In other words, it's okay to take a breath and actually think about things. It's also okay to ask a clarifying question. Yeah, someone says eat well before also. I completely agree with that. Definitely eat before. Try and be in good physical readiness because you're going to need your energy. And if you need to, ask for a break. There are stories, for example, of, oh, I interviewed at Amazon and they wouldn't let me go to the restroom. That's not true. people were rude maybe and didn't think to ask, but if you need to go to the restroom, say so. That's not, by the way, how to think faster on your feet. But the point about it is you have some agency. You're not just a victim during the whole interview process. Don't be a victim. Um, so go ahead and take the time. And if you need to, ask a clarifying question. So if you're not sure what's meant or you think you need to think on your feet, I see people all the time say, well, hold on a second. I need a minute to think of a good example that addresses your question. And so generally, if you're getting these, tell me about a time when, it's okay to think about a time when. I also see people start an answer and then change it in the middle. I've seen that happen where people need to change their answer or come up with a better answer. And they'll say, you know what? I'm going to finish this story, but I've come up with a better one. Or I think I should change to something else. Go ahead, by the way, and keep entering questions. I see we have a queue here, but they only have a couple votes. So we've got over 50 people watching. If you don't mind, go ahead and go into the Ask a New Question extension and give me some up or down votes on the existing questions so I know what all 50 of you would like to see. Because no question right now has more than 2 votes. So anybody who takes the time and goes and votes on a question is automatically going to pop it to the top because there's about a half dozen questions all tied at 2. So if that is an encouragement to you to take action, you're probably watching the wrong stream. Okay, so we will go ahead and go to the next question. I see one's at 3 now. Yay, somebody can follow instructions. Fantastic. Whoever you are, I love you. The other 48 of you, get in there and vote. You do have to log into Twitch, but that'll let you join us on chat. That'll let you follow the channel so you can find us. So when we go live on Wednesday with our resume review, you'll get the notification. So the next question is, what are some good questions I should ask when it's my turn to ask the questions? Great question. I would first prepare that in advance. Good questions I want to know. What's it like to work here? What is best? What is most challenging? What is hardest about your project? People are going to like you more if you're interested in the company and interested in them. So another question I love that's really open-ended is, what do you think I should know that we haven't discussed? Or what do you wish you had known when you joined here? Or what have you found to be best about working at Acme Inc.? You ask open-ended questions. You don't want to ask, unless you're interviewing for a very entry-level service job, how many vacation days do we get? Or, what are the benefits like? You can get that from HR after the fact if you're going to join. You want to ask questions that get people talking and get them enthusiastic. There is a thought, in fact, that if you get the interviewer talking, every minute they're talking is essentially a minute of the interview. Broadly speaking, you're winning. You don't want to tease it out too much, but if you get them enthusiastically talking, now they're telling you about themselves and they're going to have happy memories of this interview, and you have no chance to screw that up. You don't want to do that if you haven't shared enough about your qualifications, but basically the more you can engage the interviewer. Beyond that, I'd ask what you want to know. I would be careful or sensitive about asking harsh questions. And what I mean is, you're not trying to show like I'm really tough and I can put you on the spot. Amazon had a very bad article. And this is a good time for me to mention, by the way, when I talk about Amazon, I'm just sharing stories. I don't represent Amazon when I talk here or Twitch. I'm just speaking as me. But Amazon had a harsh story in the New York Times a couple years ago that basically said a lot of bad things about Amazon as a place to work. And we had people come in and ask us about it, which is totally fair. It's totally fair to ask about the workplace, particularly if it's been in the news. But I wouldn't ask that as, hey, the New York Times said you're a terrible place that treats employees badly. Is that true? That's not a good way to ask the question. If I wanted to get at that, I'd say, are you familiar with the recent New York Times article about the Amazon workplace? What's your perspective? And that allows the person to address the question. And if they want to share, good or bad, you haven't put them on the spot. So when I'm asking a hard question of an interviewer, I wouldn't do that in a way that seems judgmental. I would do it in a way that seems honestly seeking more information, because you're not going to get any bonus points in an interview kind of attacking the company. It brings me to one other good point. Please never badmouth your previous employer or your previous boss. Number one, it gets around. I had a friend of mine who actually called me up and told me, hey, do you know this guy? He was kind of bad-mouthing you when I brought up that I knew you. So I was interviewing him, and he would work at Amazon. I said, oh, do you know Ethan Evans? And he kind of trashed you. That's a bad idea. Like, if somebody asks you about your old boss, realize they may know him or her, or maybe calling him or her for a reference soon. Don't do that. But second, it's just bad style. If you're bashing someone's, our assumption is if you trash your previous employer, you're going to trash us later, because you're the sort of person who trashes your old boss or trashes your old job. Always take the high road. If you need to, say, look, I wasn't a fit there, and be able to explain why. Or say, that company wasn't a fit for me. Our interests went in different directions, and be able to explain why you believe that. But do not just run people down the road. It will never get you bonus points. So feel really strongly about that. Don't trash previous employer. All right, next question, please. That was a good one, though. Thank you. So next question's popping up. Here we go. So what if you don't have many experiences from past jobs to draw on with behavioral interviewing? Great question. Students often aren't interviewed exactly the same way. And so you can absolutely, you may not have that, but basically you just need to use the past experiences you do have. So assuming you went certainly to high school, maybe to college, you have the projects you worked on and the challenges you faced. Call up the things that were the most challenging, make a list of things you worked hard on and are proud of and you feel you accomplished a lot, even if that's a school project or a personal project with a charity or your church or a group or the Twitch channel that you love and you're a moderator. You just need to be able to talk with authenticity and passion about your skills and challenges you've overcome. Look, when a company is trying to hire you, and particularly a manager, they have a simple question in their mind. Are you going to solve some of my problems? By hiring you, is work going to get done? So you need examples that answer the question, are you going to make my life easier? And you can consider that selfish. No manager usually or interviewer comes into a room and says, I only have one question for you. Are you going to make my life easier? But that's what everyone is hiring for, because they have work that needs to get done. Maybe if you don't like that personal framing of it, you can look at it and say, look, they're thinking in their heads, can this person do the job? And they're trying to figure out, can you do the job? And if you can, great. You need stories that show that you can get work done. So that's what I would advise. So I see somebody here in chat, by the way. I can't gloss it over. It's funny. Many people forget you're interviewing the company too. I like to hand my interviewer a whiteboard marker and ask them a coding problem. Yes, it is true that many interviewers forget that it's a two-way street. Again, you're allowed some control in the interview. at the beginning, or towards the end, you can say, hey, will I have a chance to get some of my questions answered today? Or even at the beginning of the interview, I always tell people, like, I'm going to ask some questions and then save some time at the end for you to ask questions. Um, but if someone doesn't do that, you can absolutely, particularly if it's getting later in the day and no one is giving you that opportunity, um, you can go ahead and say, look, I have a few questions. It's getting late in the day and I haven't had a chance to address them. Do you think you could do that? Or do you think after I answer your questions, you could save some time for that? And I'd say it's a sign. If you're not desperate for a job and a company gives you no chance to ask questions, uh, that's a sign you don't want to work there. Like if it's all interrogation the whole day, I told the story. Not everybody maybe was here, but I told the story at the beginning of the stream. Uh, my interview day ended with someone whose only job was to sell me, and I was didn't figure that out very quickly. That was on me, but good companies provide that give and take. So, hope that helps. Let's go ahead and roll to the next question. But just use you have to run with the experience you have and make the most out of it. Catalog it as best you can, and then be honest. If you don't have an example of something, say, I'm sorry, I'm just starting my career. I'm not sure I've done something exactly like that. Is there something else I could tell you? Or how would I have it turn it around? That's always great. How would I have a chance to do that in this job? And maybe understanding what you're looking for will help me come up with a great example. Um, Answering a question with a question you can't do all the time, but it's not bad. Um, so someone here says, I have talked negatively about a previous employer because of pay disputes and fairly shady practices. Um, so, uh, again, I would not advise in an interview talking negatively about a previous employer. What you do to warn people off working for someone else, that's fine. Like there are places I would tell people not to work, perhaps based on what I know about them, or that I wouldn't go work there. But what I would advise, I guess, is in that case, I still wouldn't bring it up in an interview. That's just. In fact, if I were asked directly, "Did you ever have a bad boss?" For example, I would say, "Well, I've had bosses that I didn't fit well with because of our differences," but I wouldn't say I've had a terrible boss. Blah blah blah. He this, she that, and it isn't beneficial because the person on the other side's wondering how you're going to treat them and if you're hard to get along with. And if you can show you're a diplomat and can take the high road, that's value. All right, next question. How can I ask about company culture in a way that gets a realistic reply? It's always XYZ corporate culture is great, and then you find it's 100% cutthroat once you're in. Please recommend verbiage, etc. Um, there's a few ways there, I guess. Uh, First, not everyone's going to answer you honestly. So I would try to ask someone you have some rapport with or you're getting some positive interaction. Second, I would really try and find some of this out either through networking and asking people not during the interview or by reading reviews. But if I wanted to ask this in an interview, um, I would ask them, hey, what are the things at Acme Corp that others find difficult? Or what are some things in coming here that I might find challenging about fitting in? Or what should I know about the culture that will help me fit in? Or you could try and disarm them by saying, and I would try different techniques, maybe if I needed to, at several consecutive interviews during the day. I would say something like, hey, what's the right wording here since you want verbiage? I'd say, hey, I've heard a lot of great things about working at Acme Inc. I'm kind of wondering, are there any downsides? What would you share with me as the toughest thing here? So, and maybe chat has some suggestions on the exact wording. There's a lot of people watching who may have good ideas on this, and I always like it when chat adds a few thoughts that I may not have had. But basically, I try and research this offline, and then what I would do is I would ask in a way that tried to tease it out and say, hey, everything here seems fantastic. What are some of the challenges? Or what are some of the things I should be prepared for? But I would start it with a compliment that lets them know you love them and love the company, because it's disarming. Even if it's not completely true and you're undecided, I would say, hey, everyone here seems so excited. I'm wondering, what do people struggle with? That gives them an opening, like, oh, you love us like we love us. Great, now I can talk honestly. That's the best advice I have. And then look, some people aren't going to tell you, and I don't know what to do about that. That's the best answer, though. Let's go ahead and roll to the next question. And I've asked about whether or not, chat says, I've asked about whether or not there is a competitive aura in the office. That's a good one. I like that. So, do you have some tips for college students who don't really have actual industry experience except a few open source and personal projects looking for their first job? Yes, understand. Well, boy, I have so much advice. I hope you can replay this on Twitch later or on YouTube. This is going to be a long list. Here we go. Number 1, try and get internships. Number 2, if you can't do that, work inside the school somewhere as a part of a club or anything else that looks like experience, community volunteering. Number 3, unless your university, there's no chance, go get a part-time job doing something so that you have work experience. There's so many jobs inside a university you can do, student jobs. All of those can be turned into experience. No, they are not industry experience, but those are ways to get it. So I would try to build your resume before you're a senior looking for a job. However, failing that, I would be really honest and I would speak about the experience I do have. And you talk about open source or personal projects, I would use those productively. I would use them specifically as a way to tell a story. And so, for example, most people who watch the channel a lot know my producer, Awesome Dave, who's in chat tonight, recently got a new job. I announced that. But he's a good friend of mine. And one of the things we did is he was completing a sabbatical. And we needed to make his resume look alive. And so he added to LinkedIn that he was working as the producer on Easy Coach. And then he had a good story about how he built the question overlay, which you can think of as an open source project. But he told a story with the assets he had. So he took the open source project, in this case, building the extension we use for questions, and he turned that into a story of how during his sabbatical, he was helping a good friend, me, launch a passion project, the Easy Coach. Thank you all for watching. I do this to try and help. And I appreciate you being here so that there's an audience that benefits and you benefit from the things I've learned the hard way, and I'm hoping you don't have to. But you have to think through your stories. Do you have some tips here for students who don't have actual industry experience? You're going to have to use your course projects, things you've done in part-time jobs, things you've done in student jobs. You're going to have to do your best with those. The other thing I would say is most big companies have a different student interviewing process. For example, a lot of the Amazon process at this point for some types of jobs is completely automated. You take a series of screening tests. So this may not be as relevant. The other thing that's always good, and it's not about how to interview, but go through someone who knows you. Meaning go through an older student, try and get in contact with alumni that are already working somewhere. Try to find an in so that people have context and they can say, look, he hasn't had a lot of chance or she hasn't had a lot of chance to do this job, but here's how their coursework applies, or here's what the school teaches. Try and get around it. Let's go ahead and roll to the next question. And for folks who are in chat and watching, I appreciate that you're actually voting up the questions. That's excellent, because it lets me answer them in the order you want. And some people asked earlier how long we'll go. We'll go another little while because we got a lot of good questions here, and I'll try and pump through them real quick. So, what is the minimum amount of time that a hole in your CV would need to be explained, like half a year, 1 year, etc.? Bad news, if you show a gap even as long as a month, people might wonder. So, somebody might ask you, I'd at least want to know, if you had a gap of a couple months, people are going to assume that you got fired or let go from job one before you went to job two, because otherwise maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck and you should have been, if you had a job the whole time, you started one and went to the other. Now that's not true, and not everyone will assume that, but I would be ready to explain every job transition I made in a positive light if I could. By the way, I share openly, early in my career, or middle of my career, more, it wasn't early, I was laid off twice. During the dot-com bubble era, I went through two different companies that laid me off. So when I interviewed at Amazon, and if I interview again, and I have interviewed outside of Amazon a few times, I have to be ready to explain that. So going back to the question, I think realistically though, you're not going to be asked until it's 3 or 4 months or more. No one's going to think much of it, because taking a month or two between jobs is not unusual. So I would say the minimum amount of time is probably 2 or 3 months. Beyond 6 months, I'd definitely be ready to say what was going on. And in fact, many people fill that in on their resume in some way. They fill it in by, if they were saying consulting, they fill it in by saying taking a break and traveling the world. You're going to have to be able to explain that a little bit, but they fill it in and they just call it out and say, I took 6 months off to work on my new startup idea, but it didn't get traction, or whatever they did. What I wouldn't want to say is, a year and a half fruitlessly looking for a job with no hope. But you do need some way to explain that period, because the longer it gets, by the way, people are going to have a lot less questions, a lot fewer questions about past gaps in your resume than if you just left a job and now it's 6, 8, 12 months without a new job. They're going to wonder why you can't get hired, and you need to be explaining what education you were getting, or that you're changing careers. You need a positive explanation. You can be honest and say, I'm looking for the right job and I haven't found it yet, but you can't sound like a downer. Like, well, I just can't find a job. What that tells me, whether it should or not, is all these other companies you're presumably interviewing with have figured out some way, some reason that you're not qualified, that I should. Now it's a game of like me find why you're no good. You do not want to prompt that. So this question only asks how long. Short gaps won't matter. Gaps in the past won't matter, but long gaps really do. So all right. Next question, please. I'm checking out what chat is. So taking 3 months off to learn copywriting would be a good answer. Sure. Anytime you take time off to honestly learn, that's like going back to school. And if you're self-taught or you have a reasonable explanation of what you're doing, look, the world that my father lived in, where he joined his father's company, not that my grandfather was a pipe fitter, a plumber, an industrial plumber. So he worked in a paper mill. So when I say my grandfather's company, I don't mean that he owned it. He worked as a steam fitter. But when my dad got out of college, because his first kid in our family on that side to go to college, he went and joined grandpa's company. And he worked there his whole life. Those days are over. They're gone. And so changing jobs, no big deal. And if you leave to study something and you can actually show you did it, that's a bonus. You just turn it into an asset, an honest asset. So, all right. Let's see. Yeah, and I see Awesome Dave, who's in chat as Plus David, is telling the truth here that because he just did this, he just took a long gap. As long as you can explain what you learned, that would be solid. So, next question is top Amazon interview bar raiser interview tips, please. Well, that's kind of been the point of the whole chat or the whole discussion. But let's see. Here's a good tip. Um, After you give an answer, particularly to a behavioral story, I like to ask, did I answer your question? Or does that address your question? Basically, find out if the interviewer got what they want, because sometimes I don't ask a clear enough question, or the person doesn't follow me and they answer something else, or their answer wanders. Rather than go on, cut your answer off when you've answered and say, does that answer your question? Is there anything more you'd like to follow up on? And that gives control back to the interviewer. It shows a certain level of deference, which is always popular. And it lets you fix things if it's wrong. Whereas if you just talk and shut up, the interviewer may be thinking, well, I didn't get anything I wanted there, but I'm just going to move on. You're trying to detect. You don't ask, gee, was that the answer you were looking for? Like something that sounds like you're trying to find out if they like the answer. But you do say, did that answer your question? So that would be one of my top tips. Interviewer bar raiser tips from Amazon. I think I covered this earlier, but preparation. I know some people in chat want to be product managers, have product ideas. So if you're going to come work on a product, be ready for the question which is not behavioral. Like I work on Twitch Prime. So it wouldn't be uncommon for someone to say, well, what good ideas do you have for Twitch Prime? Or how do you think we could make the Amazon Kindle better? Or how could we make the Amazon Echo better? And they're in that case, they're testing to see, do you have any thoughts or can you think on your feet about our products? I would have thought about the company's main products, and you may not come up with an answer they don't have, a thought they've never had, but have some idea. So that's my advice on that. Go ahead and roll to the next question, mods. Thank you. And this is going great. We got a few more questions with a lot of votes. I'm going to cut it off here in not too long because we've hit the hour mark. So for all the viewers, thank you for being here. We'll answer a couple more questions. If there's anything in the queue you really want answered, this is your chance to go in and vote. For answers that can't use the STAR model, are there any other models to make use of? So STAR is, it's from behavioral interviewing. It's situation, task, action, result. And so the idea is, and I bet I know who asked this, a good friend of mine who's been working on getting a job, and I know he would know STAR model, maybe not. Maybe he isn't the one who asked it, but it's a good question. Behavioral interviewing, the behavioral interviewers are trained to look for what situation were you in, what task were you working on, what action did you take, and what result did you get. And so the situation is Twitch Prime was trying to launch for the first time, and the task I had was to figure out how to link Twitch accounts with Amazon accounts, and the action I took was blah, 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 and the result is we launched. You want to tell a complete story that has those elements. And most people leave out the results, actually. They tell about all the hard work they did, but they don't actually tell the results that they got. They don't share that part. And so I highly recommend you conclude your stories with, and we launched, and if you can, obviously the best story is that we launched the product and revenue went up 1,000%, or user complaints went down 20%, or we had to scale at Christmas to 1 million users. Whatever it is, give the result of your work. But this question is, if you can't use the STAR model, is there any other model to make use of? For a behavioral question, the STAR model should always work. But if people ask you a hypothetical question, what would you do if? What would you do if an employee came into your office crying? What would you do if people ask hypotheticals? What would you do if Amazon was bought by Google. Um, who knows? I don't know what I do necessarily, and I would try to turn that into an example of something I've done, so I could go back to the star model and tell a story. Like, let me tell a story of when my company was acquired, or let me tell a story of how I've handled emotional employee situations in the past. Um, but otherwise, I guess I would need to know what the other types of questions were that couldn't be answered by star, and I'm not currently envisioning that. Certainly, questions about your work history. If they're not behavioral, they're probably factual or skill based, in which case, answer them with the facts or the skills. Like, what was your role at Acme Inc.? There's no star model for that. You can just answer with, well, my role was this and this is what I did. Did that answer your question? Um, and if they're asking about skills like solve this coding problem, that's not star based either. You got to go do the problem. And by the way, not everything's a coding interview. Um, thanks, by the way, for the people who've cheered bits during this broadcast. I always like to say that everything that either people who subscribe or people who cheer, all of that goes to a charity that I'm on the board, the Washington Trails Association. One day we'll do a show about the great work they do and some pictures of some of the places that we go out. But until then, I appreciate it. Um, Meanwhile, if you're getting questions that don't fit, uh, I think you just have to answer them directly. And look, all jobs may have functional competencies. So we ask product managers about gathering requirements and how they've done it. We ask financial people about business models. That kind of thing happens. Let's see. All right. Let's go to the next question. And meanwhile, looking in chat, I see someone says they start off at a meat cutter. That's pretty interesting. Wow. Yeah, I had a friend who worked at an abattoir, right, where they butcher cows. He told me, and I don't know if it's true, but he made the point that beef is graded USDA Choice Prime, a couple other things. And then you go backwards. USDA grade A, grade B, grade C. Well, there's a grade D, but I learned that I guess there's grade D edible and inedible. So he claimed that Taco Bell used grade D edible. And that we should beware because the next grade down was grade D inedible. I have no idea if that's true, but it made an interesting story. All right, question. How important do you think it is to build out one's social media or blog? I'm not really drawn to writing up my personal projects in practice, but acknowledge that a good following gives you credibility as an industry expert. Is it worth the effort, or should I prioritize my time elsewhere? I wouldn't do that. I would not write up a blog if you're not passionate about it, because I think it's going to come through in your writing. I think you're going to do one or two blog posts and end up dropping it. And then what I'm going to find later, if I Google you or check you out as an interviewer, and I do this sometimes, I'll say more about a good story there in a second. I'm going to find your half-ass blog that shows that you don't really like to blog. But then I'm going to be left wondering, is it you didn't really want to blog, or is it that you really didn't follow through on the personal project? Nothing says what the hell's wrong with this guy than a stale blog and website. So if you have that out there, take it down. If you're going to do this, you have to find a way that you're going to be able to sustain it. And I would invest my effort. We haven't talked about this on this stream yet here tonight. You're going to get the most results from working on things that you feel strongly about, that you can invest in naturally. So if I had a choice between putting more time into my personal project and making that project better or stronger, or writing about it, I'd probably put the time into making the project more impressive. Now, if you can find a way to be passionate about sharing it with someone, it doesn't have to be on your own blog. It could be on Reddit. It could be on Stack Overflow. I have seen people say, hey, this is my contributor level or the badges or status I've earned in certain expert forums. At Twitch, I've even seen people cite their professional level of gameplay on their resume. Like, I'm this good of a gamer at League of Legends or whatever. And so that's what they do. Um, so uh, I would say I wouldn't do this. Yeah, it isn't worth the effort unless you can find a way to do it right. I'd put that effort into making your skills better. If you need a way to share those or to gain credibility, there are probably a lot of other ways to do it, references, etc. I think we're hopping to the next question, which is great. We'll do two more here, and then we'll call it a night. Uh, okay. I've been prepping for technical interviews for many weeks now. How do I know when to bite the bullet and schedule interviews? I just feel like I can always prep more and more. Yes, you can. Don't do that anymore. If you've been prepping for weeks, go try a dry run. Um, uh, there are, by the way, and these are expensive, so don't use them if it's not in your means. There are companies that will do mock interviews for you. One of the people who often is here in the chat went through a couple mock interviews as practice. That's a very expensive way to get practice, but it was important to him and he had the means. Um, you can get someone to interview you as a friend who may work at one of those companies and run you through, but basically, there's a lot of companies in the world. I was just advising someone who reached out to me for advice, having seen what I do on LinkedIn. I just advise him go actually interview at a couple of companies that aren't your top few choices. So I look, you're talking about technical interviews. There's so many technical companies hiring. Go find one or two or three that you would be okay working at, but that aren't your first choices, and try it out and see what happens. Learn very quickly if you're prepared. So, um, all right. Let's see. Next question. I'm leaving community college and looking to transfer to a 4-year university. Does it really matter what school I choose? Absolutely. This is going to be depressing for people that don't want to hear it, but many people judge by the name of the university you went to. And they have a scorekeeping system in their head that's whatever it is, but it's, great tech schools, MIT, Berkeley, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, etc. Or Ivy League schools, so is it Harvard, Yale, etc. And did you go to the great tech schools or the great Ivy League? And then below that, they have all the big state schools, so University of Washington, Ohio State, um, uh, University of Indiana, basically all the big Midwest schools, Michigan, and so they keep score. And when you get down to, um, University of Des Moines or something, and now I'm going to hear from all the people who went to University of Des Moines, but that's the way it goes. Someplace that is not as well regarded, that's going to make a difference. Now, um, getting a degree is a checkbox at some places where all they're looking for is, do you have that 4-year degree? And HR is screening on the degree, and the interviewer is deciding whether or not to hire you. Great. At that place, it won't matter. But for the top jobs, the better school you can go to, it absolutely matters. You have to make a decision about the debt load you're going to pick up, because the bigger school you go to, probably the bigger the name, the bigger the cost. And that's going to be pretty much true across the board. You have to decide if you can handle that debt load and if you're in a career field that's going to pay for it and if you want to. But that's a choice you have to make. I see one of our moderators here, 40 Pink Dragons, is commenting, in some industries and for some jobs, it doesn't matter. That is correct. That is correct if you're in a field where it's HR screening for, do you have a college degree? It is not true in tech. It's not going to be true at the top employers, the so-called FANG employers in tech. They're going to look to see what school you went to. It doesn't mean you can't get a job having gone to University of Des Moines, if there is such a thing. I don't even know. But it's going to be harder. And I've talked about this, some of you, and you can see on YouTube where I was coaching, I think it was Kevin, but it may have been Shivang, who came out of an Indian university with a name that most American interviewers are not going to recognize. So they all they literally know is, well, he went to some school probably, and do I believe it? And That's harder than coming from a recognizable place. And so those things are going to get judged. That said, go to the school that's going to give you the best education. Go to the school that's going to build your skills so that you can accomplish things, because in the end, that will matter more. Pick on where you're going to be able to do the best and learn the most, not on the name. But I'm not going to lie to you and say the name doesn't matter. It matters a lot. All right. When you've been fired in the past, it's hard to calibrate how much to dive into um, uh, when asked to explain. Thoughts? Oh boy. Yes. I wouldn't volunteer unless asked. Like if you can get a job without somebody asking you why did you leave Acme Inc., um, uh, don't bring it up. But if it comes up that you lost your job at Acme Inc., you got to be straightforward about it. And again, I've said earlier on the stream, don't badmouth others. Don't talk about how Acme Inc. was wrong and did you wrong and they're a horrible company. Um, Instead, what you do need to do is just have a clear explanation that said, look, whatever your reason was, I was not a match for this work. I got into a position where my skills were not aligned with what the company needed, and I wasn't succeeding in that role. And then explain what your skills are, but own it. I've told this story on the stream before. My wife has a shirt that says "Own Your Shit." We talked about it when I did the ownership stream. You got to own your shit. I told you earlier I was laid off twice. Well, you don't get laid off if they think you're the most valuable employee in the company. So when I got laid off both times, other people didn't get laid off. Now, was I fired? No, I was let go. But it's the same thing. Why was I let go? I wasn't the most valuable person. I wasn't delivering the most value. So I don't know your circumstances. I would try and get in and get out. So like when I explain how I got laid off at, say, one of my jobs, I say truthfully, well, one of the roles I had at that company is I was driving our hiring process, and I also owned quality assurance. And when the company started contracting, they weren't as interested in QA. They wanted people directly building software, and they figured they could rehire QA when they were ready to ship it. And they certainly didn't need someone who was driving recruiting. And so in that case, it made sense to take me out of the workforce. And then I turned it into an honest, positive story about how I actually managed my own exit and was part of organizing the laid off employees to find jobs somewhere else. So I basically told a positive story out of it. The point is here, I would calibrate how much to dive into it. I would dive into it as little as you can. I'd give a clean answer and move on. Be willing to talk about it and be honest and transparent. You know, I wouldn't. I'm thinking about this answer because, like, if the answer is you were fired for stealing, I guess I wouldn't say that, and I would hope you're not going to do it anymore. You'll have to figure out how to answer that one. But if you were fired because you didn't match the work, talk about what you learned and how things are different now, and then move on. Like, I'd want to be in and out in under a minute. Okay, next question here. I'm 16 years old and I'm trying to find a job that I can do at home because I can't drive. I don't know where to start and what to do. Are there any tips or advice or specific jobs I can check out? Wow. I'm afraid I'd love to help. That's very far from my experience here and what I normally do, which is help professionals who are growing in their career, usually post-college. Working from home as a 16-year-old because you can't drive. Very few things. Obviously, you like Twitch. There are some people who pay their moderators. I'm not in that market right now. But you're going to have to find something online. And I'm not the right person to advise you. So, Devin Nash, actually, I'll be on his show on the 24th. He would be a good guy for this question. If you can get him and answer it, he has a whole theory about how you can basically build a business doing arbitrage off of eBay, and that's the perfect. And I see Chalupa Whale here says become a Twitch streamer. Yeah, you're gonna have to do something entrepreneurial. Devin has this long story which is very good about how the perfect job is figure out what you can buy cheap on eBay and resell, or buy at yard sales and resell on eBay, and how you'll learn about commerce that way. That's not a bad idea for someone in your situation. Try being entrepreneurial. All right, we're going to do one last question, and then we're out. And that question, let's see, how much does having experience at FANG actually help you when applying to other companies? I think where you've worked before is tremendously like the question I just answered about schools. Your previous resume experience absolutely matters about where you're going to get hired next. And so the FANG stocks, just to repeat for anybody who doesn't know them because it's an acronym, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they're often mentioned as a group because they're the big tech companies that have had rocket stock growth over the past decade. Yeah, having a great company on your resume serves as validation that you're pretty good at something, whether it should or not. I'm not arguing that it's true. I'm arguing that's how people see it. They think, oh, you made it at Amazon. It's just like you made it through Harvard. We have at least one Harvard grad in the chat, and she made it through Harvard, and that people see that as an accomplishment because it's a top school and it's considered very hard to get into. Well, same thing. I said earlier, if you've had a big gap in your resume, people wonder, and I start to wonder, well, what do other companies know about you that they're not hiring you? What do I know about you? What should I be trying to figure out? The reverse becomes true if you've been at one or a series of great companies. People think, oh, you did well at Amazon, you did well at Google. They must know things I didn't. Like, of course I want you. You've got all this great experience, and they've already vetted. Now, it could be the truth is you bombed at Amazon and then you snuck into Google and they hated you too. But people don't think that way. They think, oh, 2 years at Amazon, 3 years at Google. Wow, this woman or man has 5 years of amazing experience, but they don't think that way. All right, so a few announcements on our way out. I have my cheat sheet here. So we're going to be back just 2 days from now, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific. I know it's late for the viewers on the East Coast, but we're going to do live resume review. I have room, at least I did before I started the broadcast, for a couple more resumes. So you can send them to easycoach1@gmail.com. We'll do, you can remove personal information if you want. You don't have to put your name and address up. You can even, I had one person who sent me a completely anonymized resume where they had replaced the name of every company with a description of the company. It says like Fortune 500 industrial company and so on. You can send it all in. I'll go through as many resumes as I can giving feedback. And I'm going to do this because a lot of the resumes are terrible. We get resumes that are really bad, that don't have action words in them, that don't have the right information. And so I want to make sure you get the interview. Since we've now gone through this chat about how to succeed in the interview, I want to make sure you actually get the interview. I mentioned already, we're going to be on June 24th. I'll join Devin Nash on his stream mid-afternoon, about 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to do a long breakdown of one of our shared favorite books, Decisive, talking about decision making, one of the most important topics in leadership. Other announcements real quick. Follow our blog on www.theeasycoach.com to get our schedule and announcements of new shows. Follow us here on Twitch to get notifications when the channel starts up. And of course, follow us on YouTube or catch up on any missed content. Share out to your friends the fact that we have podcasts available. If they can't make this, they can listen. We're distributed through every major podcast. And beyond that, thank you so much for being my audience tonight. I love what we've done. I appreciate all of you very much, and I hope if you're interviewing, you get a great job. Good night.